Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about The Ordinary Joe season finale. A great season finale. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, let's start off in the musician career reality, where we're picking up after the car accident. That went way differently than I thought it was. I thought she would be injured too, his personal trainer that he's having an affair with. But it turns out she was pretty okay. Like, obviously, she's like, Joe, are you okay? And goes to get help. And that's pretty much the last time we see her in the episode. The episode kind of falls out, at least to fall out today. That's kind of what I thought it was. It's like, right, your passenger is most likely going to sue you. Luckily, she didn't. She came out of it not as banged up as Joe did. And they don't talk about it, but I guess like any of his injuries aren't like long lasting that he will be able to recover because his arm is all jacked up. And I thought that maybe, just maybe, that it would be a situation. Last episode I was thinking like, oh, maybe his hands will be jacked up. He can never play a guitar again type of thing. But it seems like he's okay. And obviously he's asking like, oh, is anyone else hurt? Which at first I'm like, oh, that's sweet. But I think it's supposed to imply like, oh, he was worried about the person who he hit as well. But I think it's more so like, oh, the person you're with, and it's like, yeah, she's fine, Joe. Like like Frank was just kind of calling him out and was like, really? Yes, the other person involved was, oh, no one's hurt except for you. She's got a couple of scrapes, but it's fine. And so obviously he's talking to Amy and he's like, I don't want to talk about this right now. And just like, right, sends Eric and Frank out of the room because obviously these are the people that were most scared and worried about him. And Amy's like, regardless of where our marriage ends up, I love you, you know, whether we make it or not. Like, I want you to know that I love you. And I just, you know, I don't want to see you sit here and like kill yourself. He's like, I wasn't trying to kill myself. She's like, really? Because this almost seems like you are, you know? And so it kind of, you know, yes, he's going through some stuff. He tried to justify like, no, I wasn't drunk driving and stuff like that. But it wasn't till later on. Like, obviously, you know, he called Jenny, who like has a buddy of hers to kind of represent Joe. And so it's a situation of, all right, so because he is a celebrity and he was drunk driving, they're going to go extra hard on you just because you are a celebrity and they want to make an example out of you because they don't want to make it seem like, right, just because you're this famous musician doesn't mean you're above the law. So you're most likely going to have to go to rehab and stuff. But he's like, no rehab. Like, can I just pay a fine or something? Which I'm like, that's the issue there. Like, most people are like, all right, I'll do the rehab, like the massive fine and just like the lawsuits are most potentially going to file afterwards. But it's also like, that's and I think that's the problem too. Like, the fact is, he's like, can I just pay it's like, no, shut up. Like, that you want to just pay a fine off after you were completely in the wrong drunk driving. But Jenny actually sits and talks to him and she's like, right, she talks about like the course her life was on because she's like, if I did this by not telling you all those years ago about Zeke or the way I told you now, like that was kind of messed. Like, he was like, yes, I wish you had told me sooner. Like, maybe like you wouldn't have had to go in alone. Like, maybe we could have raced together, as we see how that plays out in the nursing reality, which I didn't talk about it, but I did like that. Because he was in that state he was in, his dad, like, he saw a vision of his dad being like, yes, son, like, drunk driving, this and that, like, having, like, this isn't you. It's like, he's like, I'm sorry, like, your life just got so off track. Basically, you know, he needs to put in the work to put it back on track, essentially. That's kind of where it all went wrong. But as he was kind of, like, rolling through, like, I couldn't quite tell. It looked like it was just a different officer, but I don't know if that was supposed to be, like, kind of Joe. Like, because, like, right, while he's laying on the table, like, he kind of see a vision of him as a nurse. So it's like, I think in that moment, his brain was kind of bleeding these realities together. Just kind of like what his life could have been, like, right, if he had put his life on track, like, how different this life ended up than any other life, obviously, you know, the past that were before him. And I think maybe just in that moment, he's thinking about where he could be. It's just, or maybe it's just supposed to be a little just symbolic or whatever. Either way, like, whether that's just like him slipping in and out of consciousness. I don't think it's a thing of like, oh, he's bleeding into the other realities. It's like, no, I think it's just in that moment, just thinking about like, right, these are the lives presented before me. I could have been a cop. I could have been like, just the possibilities of everything else his life could have been. I think it was just supposed to show in that moment. I think that was just more for us than it really was for Joe. It was for him, but I think they just did that specifically as just like a storytelling device. But obviously, But right, getting back to it, Jenny talked about the struggles she went through, going off to get her law degree and stuff like that. But the problem was she couldn't focus because she found out she was pregnant. She ended up having to give Zeke up. I think that was after her mom had died. So she was going through all of that alone. And then she was struggling in school to the point that she was like, right, they had to put me on like probation, me valedictorian. And then so things kind of spiraled out from there. She came home and her dad asked her like, what do you need me to do? Like, what do you want? And so and for her, it's like, yeah, these past 10 years have been rough for her, like things didn't go the way she wanted them to. Like, obviously she had her 10-year plan, but that 10-year plan kind of fell apart in more ways than one, considering everything. So she basically wants Joe to kind of basically put his life back on track because she doesn't want to see him because she's like, right, it took her 2 months before she was willing to ask for help because she couldn't bring herself to realize, like, she was just so caught up in everything that she couldn't bring herself to realize like something was wrong. She didn't want to even admit that, and it took her a long time before she actually accepted any help, and she just wants Joe to accept some help. Like, she doesn't want it to get to that. I mean, it already kind of has gotten to that point for Joe. So, and even his uncle Frank showing him the car, it's like, right, that car is significant because it's something like his dad brought home. It's like, right, I can never afford one like on a cop salary. It'd take me another 20 years to do that. So, but it became a pet project for them. They worked together. So that car is symbolic of like the time he spent with his dad. It was something they put time in together to fix up. And now it's in the state that it's in. And then Frank opens up a little bit about the circumstances where that car came from. It was a drunk driver. So that his dad at the time was stressed about a lot of stuff, so he was drinking, which kind of lends itself more to the fact is that, what Celeste was talking about, like their dad and everything. I think this was one of those moments where like his life went to at least a somewhat better direction, because after that, he was able to put all the stuff that he would be putting towards his addiction of drinking. He made working on that car with Joe his new addiction, and it gave him focus, and he was more focused on that and less on drinking. And so he was able to kind of deal with things in his own way, which, Joe's like, I wish you had told me something like that. And he's like, well, yeah, like, that's the thing. Like, we don't talk. It's like, yeah, the Kimbrough family issue. Like, they have a hard time talking about stuff. Like, that's been a through line all across the board for all the Joes of like having a hard time talking about anything. So, and then once again, it's not just him, it's his entire family has a hard time doing that. So obviously Frank wants, it's like, right, if your dad was here, he'd tell you the same thing. Go to rehab. And he's like, all right, I will. Even picking up the St. Christopher necklace he had hanging on the mirror. And so he goes, and it's like, right. Obviously, Frank is like, this is not your fault. We just want you to get better. So he does go to the rehab. Now, whether he's actually giving it his all, I don't know. But it does present this stuff of like, right, when it comes to apologizing for every little wrong thing, like, because our drinking and stuff like that, we end up hurting people, whether we intend it to or not. We end up hurting the people we care about. They end up suffering the most because of what we do. So it's up to us to kind of make up, apologize for those mistakes that we make. And so the thing is, what made me kind of think Joe was kind of a little reluctant was the fact is it almost seemed like he wasn't talking. I don't know if that was one of those situations where you just listen or whether it's I think that's all about those meeting type of things of you can talk if you want to or you want to just listen. But he was listening, but he wasn't putting forth anything. We don't know. We only got little cuts of stuff here and there with some of those meetings, so we don't know all that was kind of discussed. But I think once again that kind of plays into Joe not really wanting to talk. Then there's the whole Amy thing because it turns out she's losing the election. I'm sure everything with Joe, because he was like, right, you can spin this whatever you want to. Amy's like, I don't care about that. I just care about you. I'm not worried about the election or anything like that. But it seems like she's going to lose in the end. Everything's set up for her to lose. And so at the end of it all, Amy's there with Eric, which once again, just kind of like how tight-knit they are in just so many different realities. Obviously them being together in the nursing reality, and obviously because of their relationship, her relationship with Joe in the cop reality, they're pretty tight there too. But obviously things run even deeper because they've known each other like way longer in this reality because of Joe well, at least, it's the same length as that reality as it is this reality, that they've been in each other's lives, in the nursing reality and this musician reality. But regardless, when Joe escapes and he wants to make amends and he shows up, I was like, the moment you saw the street, I was like, oh, that's definitely not Joe's place. That's him apologizing in front of Jenny and stuff like that. You're like, wow. And so, because for him, it's like, right, he feels like his life got off track the moment he didn't go to see Jenny at that party. Like, if he had gone there, who knows how things would have played out. Well, we know how things would have played out. But now he's like, right, you're my one true love. And that's also the problem. He thinks like getting with Jenny is going to fix everything. It's like, you got to fix a lot of you first. There's a lot of issues. Granted, him and Amy aren't in a good spot, so I don't know. The thing is, I guess he's kind of solidified in his mind that he doesn't want to fix his marriage, that it's beyond that, just because there's so much. It's like, not only did she have an affair with Bobby, she's having his baby, but then also it's like, right, you were spiraling. Like, you didn't handle things the best way you could have because you didn't take time to actually talk to Amy. So, I mean, he made up his mind last episode. He was drunk, but I think in this moment, he's got this clarity. Like, and I think that is kind of sucky, rather than trying to be there for Amy in this moment, because it's like, right, you're so upset with her right now that you're thinking like, right, what I need to fix, like, obviously, it's like, you got to apologize to people because he wants to apologize to Jenny for not being there when she needed him through those tough times. So I guess it's like because obviously that day after graduation was a pivotal point where, like, the choices he made, him choosing not to be there in the police reality for her, or even in the musician reality, only reality he was there for her in was the nursing reality. So for things to kind of turn out the way they have, I don't know. It's really interesting, and just kind of like, I kind of feel like, that kind of sucks for Amy. Like, it just feels like the wrong time to be doing that. I know you're trying to make amends, but it also feels like you're just like, I've got to follow my heart. It's just like, you're not in the right position to really be thinking clearly. I don't think that's where we end up, but I think Jenny needed to hear that. I'm sure things are complicated at home with the whole Zeke revealed to her husband and the truth on that, so that's going to complicate things both, because you are both married despite, because we don't know what's going on between Jenny and her husband, like whether there's been issues beyond that. Like, we haven't really touched on that storyline since the whole Zeke thing was revealed, and we know where Amy and Joe stand, so that's definitely going to be interesting. Moving on to the nursing reality, obviously in the aftermath of, I was wondering whether it was like, okay, did Joe and Kinsley actually kiss? Oh, yep, they did. And now it's weird and awkward. And now he feels bad because he's going to Eric, because he was like, I cheated on her. Like, I might as well have cheated on her. And Eric's like, okay, like, you don't actually love Kinsley. He's like, yeah, it's just you and Jenny have been talking through FaceTime. It's just like, right. He's like, yeah. And, Valentine's is coming up and we never miss one. So yeah, make a road trip out of it. Bring Zeke along as well, And it is kind of like complicated, because it's like, right, you're only going to see Jenny now because you made a mistake and you're feeling guilty about it, which I think is interesting. It's interesting how, like, a lot of stuff, like, parallels each other to some extent between the different realities. I mean, that's the whole point. The show's been doing that a lot, but especially in this episode with, like, right, trying to make it up to Jenny, whereas, like, musician him's trying to make it up to Jenny. So he wants to make things right between him and Jenny, which I think is interesting, considering, like, that musician Joe didn't want to do the same thing with Amy. So I think that's funny. But he ends up going on this road trip, which Chris has his reluctancy, because he's like, right, why are we suddenly doing that? Like, Mom, we just saw her in Christmas. He's like, yeah, but I miss her a lot. Come on. But they did kind of make a road trip out of it. And I thought it was interesting because it's like they didn't get on a plane because his dad was like, yeah, I don't want to take the chance they might destroy a wheelchair, because I guess it happens a lot more frequently that wheelchairs end up getting destroyed because of all of that. So it's like he'd rather not take the chance. So it's like, yeah, we made a road trip out of it rather than taking a plane. And Chris kind of started thinking, like, right, if I can't even get on a plane without there being issues, like, what are the chances of me becoming a pilot? He's like, no, like an astronaut. But he's like, yo, but the fact is, like, he's basing it on something from years and years ago. It's like, no, that was something years ago, and there's been advancements since then. And it's like, right, Stephen Hawking went into zero gravity despite everything, and just because you're disabled, that doesn't mean you yourself, just like we came up with the zip up pants, like, who's to say in years from now you won't innovate something that makes being an astronaut even more accessible for those who are disabled, you know? So like, you got to dream big, you know? And I like that because obviously it's like, right, your son is young and he has his dreams and they feel like they're so far away out of his reach, but to make him realize like, no, like they're within your reach. Like you can't give up. You gotta dream big. That's the only way you're going to make your dreams come true. So I thought that was kind of a nice moment. He's like, hey, you want to stop for fries? He's like, you just read my mind, Dad. But them seeing this SpaceX launch together like that was super cute. He's like, yeah, you'd rather see this in person rather than like at school. And he's like, you're right. So it's like they get to see that. It's kind of this beautiful moment. Like there was a silver lining to all this, but I feel bad that the reasoning behind it was like, right, I'm trying to reconfirm my love. I feel it was born out of guilt. That's what kind of taints it a little bit in my mind of like, yeah, I mean, there was a beautiful silver lining to it. Like some of the moments between you and Chris, you had really good conversations, like, but like I said, it's a little salted just because like, right, it's guilt that drove you to make this decision. So there's that. Obviously at the same time, Jenny's dealing with her case. Obviously it kind of goes a little sideways. They were able to get some of the investigators like testimony thrown out. But the problem is there was new evidence brought to light that kind of compromises things and it kind of sidelined them. So now it is a situation like, well, what are we going to do? And obviously they want to like come at them like humans. Like this comes down to the closing argument. And it's Jenny wants to give it like, because she's like, as a mother, I have a child about the same age as our client, so I want to do this, make them realize that it isn't just the law, especially when you kind of get into their clients like circumstances, because like the actual fraud of it all is that basically she tried to keep her daughter in the same school district, so she could go to the same school, but like she had lost her house because her husband died from COVID. She was working 2 jobs just to keep the house, ended up losing it. And I think she probably forged some documents. And that's the thing of like, there could be some like, I get it, but also I'm like, the law is a law for a reason, but I also feel like, man, that's a little, like, I get it, because it's like, right, you want to keep your daughter in the same school, you want to keep some normalcy considering, like, everything that went down, losing her dad, losing their home, like, obviously you want to keep some normalcy in your daughter's life, so you fudged to, like, your address to make it seem like you were still in the area, so I don't know why, it's just interesting. I think that's so interesting, like, how school district stuff works like that, and the fact is that it makes sense, because you are forging, like, you are giving false information to the government, like, that is government, like, federal information, but it's still, like, that's what this was all about, and so Jenny put her perspective out there to the jury. It's like, she was able to empathize to him, because even her boss, like, she was able to convince her boss, like, okay, fine, or her teacher/boss would be like, right, you convinced me to let you get the closing statement, you go ahead and do it, because she was originally going to take it herself. Well, initially it was supposed to be Jenny's, but because of where the case is now, it's like, right, we kind of laxed up a little bit, but like, right, cases can be unpredictable, you never know when that right hook is going to come, so she was like, I'm going to do the closing statement now, but hearing Jenny's plea, she ended up giving it to Jenny, so... And Jenny nailed it, talking about, like, what she did. It's like, yes, the law is but it's also like, right, she's a mother that struggled through all these things. She just wanted, a mother doing whatever she can for her child's sake. Like, is that really, like, any different than any other parent would do? So, and luckily they come back not guilty, so everything works out in the end. But her partner decides, like, hey, like, I'm going to open my own firm. I'm going to stay here in Atlanta. I'm not going to go back to New York. I'm opening it. I want you to join me. And I'm like, that's going to be... Like, I was actually halfway expecting Jenny legitimately to just be like, I can't. I got my family. Like, she's like, I need to at least talk to Joe and Chris about this. I actually surprised she was like, no, I've been away from my family enough. Because she tried to be like, right, I'm not even a full lawyer. I'm still, like, going to school. I don't even have my degree yet and stuff like that. He's like, yeah, but you can take the bar here and everything's going to be fine. I mean, like... the prosecutors like had our client dead to right, and you won this case, and you're not even officially a lawyer either. So you're not practicing in that regard, but it's like you still won this case for us. So I'm sure like we can work at this together. So, and Joe and Chris, the moment she's like drinking and stuff like that, I'm like, I was like, I felt like she would have been a little bit more awkward. That's why I was like, oh, maybe he's not here. But like her expression, oh, Joe, hey, Chris, like, you got, I'm like, okay, maybe he's not here. I was like, okay. It's probably still the thing of, you probably should have called me to let me know. And it's like, oh, we just miss you so much. And then Joe's like, and he gets down. I'm like, what are you about to do? And he's like, oh, like, let's basically renew our vows. and home dude's in the room with her. Luckily, they didn't do anything. They're just drinking, so it's nothing bad, but it's still kind of like both of you got some guilt to feel about, because it's like, there's something there between Jenny and her friend, but then there's also things between Joe and Kinsley, and it's just awkward, and it doesn't help that. I mean, Chris is there, but he probably is not going to think much of it. I mean, he is a smart kid, so he might think something of it. I don't know. But also, like, once again, Joe's not there for the best reasons. You're there because out of guilt. I can't stress that enough. But it's like, yeah, there's just been inklings on both sides of things. Like, I mean, once again, it's because they haven't gone to therapy. Like, their relationship was kind of, like, not saying falling apart, but they probably weren't using all the tools to aid them during these, like, separated moments and stuff like that. So it kind of seemed like we were I mean, it was already there with them being in two different states. Long distance relationships are pretty hard considering, like, everything she's aiming for. Once again, I think just the interesting parallel to the fact is that marriage being complicated in musician reality, while it's also super complicated in the nursing reality as well. Like, that's just an interesting point to lead that story off at. You're like, oh, that's a little complicated. So what does that mean? Once again, it's like, oh, we were just innocently having drinks. You're the one that kind of randomly showed up here. It's just going to lead to some interesting conversations potentially in the future is all I'm going to say. But other aspects to this reality is that the adoption kind of went through for Amy and Eric. And I love that while they're in when the lady's giving birth, and like Eric's freaking out because the machines are going. He's like, oh, they're making this noise. He's like, oh, this, like, did they give her the epidural? Like, all this stuff. He was freaking out. But luckily, when it was all said and done, the baby came out, and like they get to this. I'm also worried. I mean, she signed off on it. I'm assuming maybe she will still be in the baby's life, but I'm also like, well, giving birth is going to be a little bit different. Like, in that moment in the room, maybe things will change where it's a situation where she's like, cause I don't know if she really talked, I don't know if they really got into the circumstances of like why she's giving up, like, not like it matters. It's like her choice is her choice, but I don't know if it's like a money situation. She's just not in a position to take care of the baby, and she just feels like this will be the opportunity to give the baby the best chance in life. But I'm wondering, like, the reason why I was bringing it up, because I was curious, like, I think it can happen, you know, you get caught up in the moment of giving birth that it makes you go like, no, like, I want to keep them, that you start feeling bad. Like, no, I can do this. I can do this. Like, I don't want to give my baby up. Like, that moment, you know, you're being the biological mom, maybe something hits in that moment. Like, once again, we don't know the ins and outs of like the adoption and like whether like she decides she wants to still be in the baby's life or not. I don't think it's like a closed adoption type of thing, but you never know. I love how that parallels to Eric and Mel with their situation, which I love the whole bet in the police. It's like, Mel's like, I know what you guys are doing. They're like, what are you talking about? It's like, you both bet on when my due date was going to be. Amy, you bet on whether or not it was going to be today. And Joe, you did bet someday next week. He's like, not just any day, specifically Valentine's Day, because I'm a hopeless romantic. I just love that there's all this betting and stuff like that. And then her faking it with her, like, faking her water breaking, which I was like, that's super good. She got you guys so, because I expected Amy to be like, oh my God, because she got so caught up in the moment. Oh my God, like, did we get it? This, the bag, where's everything? You know, and they're freaking out and panicking. But I almost expected Amy to be like, and I won, I got it, yeah, in your faces. But it didn't turn out to be that way. Luckily, she didn't get too hyped about it, because if she did, it would have all blown back in her face when it's like, yeah, actually, I'm not I'm not giving birth right now. So I thought that was dope. But obviously, Amy records her first episode of her podcast with her parents, and they kind of talk a little bit about her father's circumstances. Obviously, spending 2 years in jail for something he didn't do. Even Amy talking about the fact that she couldn't even give her dad a card because it was covered in glitter. I'm like, what is that? What's that? Why is that significant? Like, in the sense of like, why do they have an issue with the glitter? Like, is it supposed to be like, how do we know it's actually glitter, not drugs or something? I don't know if that was supposed to be like the reasoning behind them. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. I mean, obviously, like, what is this? Like some old school, I was about to say if it was a cake, what are you going to say? Like this, some old school thing of like, oh, you're bringing in like drugs or a nail file so you can file through the bars and escape. Like, you know, I don't know what that really was about, but it turns out that cop that arrested him, just because I'm a brown man and it just happened to fit the description. Like, he saw a brown person and his prejudice kicked in. But that cop didn't suffer any ramifications. In fact, he's running for like some commissioner position in Miami. So, but the problem is he's also running unopposed. So, because Amy would say, like, "Oh, we'll protest and we'll also like support his like opponent, but like no one's running against him." It's like, well, we'll find someone because the world needs to basically know what kind of person they're voting for. When he has, it's like, do you want someone like this, like having so much power and control, when it's like, right, he hasn't suffered the ramifications for what he did, and taking 2 years away from someone wrongly, because he was like, right, I'm a man who did nothing wrong, but the system kind of screwed him. Like, the system as a whole, like, it's all part of cogs of one machine of like, right, it takes one corrupt person to kind of send you down the chain of corruption that can be a part of the system. There is good and there is bad in the system, you know? Was it this that talked about it? I don't remember if it was this. Oh yeah, it was Amy. She was like, the system is good, it's just not good for people like me. You know, it works for people who aren't people like me. It's kind of was her point, so. But obviously having dinner with Joe and her family, and that's complicated. Because it's like, cool, the moment he's like, right. I was wondering whether he like knew or whether, because like Amy was like, you probably don't want to show up in your uniform. She had brought that up previously in a different episode, but that's why he was like, oh, I'm on duty. You can tell that triggered her dad a little bit, but it's like, okay, so it is out there, but they were kind of ignoring it for a bit. Because her mom is saying that she wanted to take that position to kind of run against that guy. So... but her dad brought up Joe's position, which Joe was like, I completely understand. That guy should have been arrested for what he did. And he's like, yeah, I get it, Joe. Not all cops need to be brushed with the same brush. But he's like, how do you justify like doing your job when you are surrounded by people who like have that position and stuff like that? And he's like, I do understand. And it's like, it's a good question. You know, it's like, that's the thing of like, all you can do is try to be the best cop that you can be. And when you see that those people doing stuff like that, you need to call them out because that's part of your duty as well. Obviously, that turns into a complicated thing. They didn't really go into it, but there is the veil of blue that is like, you will suffer ramifications for that because it's like, oh, you're turning against your own type of thing. But her dad brings up Frank. I was like, right, what about him doing something? It's like, well, yeah, that's complicated because he's family. And he's like, yeah, but you and me potentially in the future could be family too. So what then? It's like, because Frank's circumstances are a little different. Like, did he do the thing he did? And it's like, oh, technically he did, but it was other circumstances at play there. And Amy's apologizing, but it's like, you know, Joe's like, no, I get it. Like, he's like, I'm sorry, I potentially made things awkward for you. So, at the end of it all, Amy's dad and mom actually want her to come back to Miami because it's like, right, just come back home. Like, you're working the job you're working and it's not, you can't even pay to live here. Like, it's not enough money for you. You know, you can follow your dreams here in Miami. It's like, is Joe the only reason why you're staying here? So they're convincing her to come back and help her mom run her campaign. And that kind of puts Amy in this complicated position. Because it's like, right, is Joe the only thing that's keeping you here in New York? And so, obviously, there's also the element of Frank's hearing. And Joe, the question is, what was he going to do? And even then, you could tell early on that Frank was kind of listening to what Joe was saying. And then Joe got to the very end of it. He was like, but I don't think my uncle should be reinstated. Not right now, because his demons did come back. Yes, he dealt with it a long time, and he is a good cop, but his demons have reared their ugly head, and he's not, I don't think he should be reinstated. Not now, not right, not today, but not right, not forever, like non-reinstated, but like just give it some time till he can like fight his demons again. And it turns out his uncle is getting reinstated, but only after he does like 30 days at like a rehab type of thing, like a dealing with his drinking, which obviously Joe left the room and his uncle follows him and he's like, okay, I'm not bad with this argument. And I love that Frank was like, no, like just shut up, and hugs him because he's like, right. Because despite everything, he is like, right, you were taught to do the right thing, and this was the right thing because I am not in a position where I'm good. And you're paralleling it with the conversation they had in the musician reality where they're hugging, where he's like, I'm only doing, you're not to blame. We just want you to get better. Now Joe's giving Frank that speech. You're not to blame. I just want you to get better. Because obviously we tapped into that a little bit about Frank in the nursing reality, trying to get him better before he ends up dying because of everything So, but it seems like his uncle, we haven't really circled back to it, but like he was at least getting his uncle help there. So, for the shoe to be on the other foot in a musician reality, but also on that same foot in the police reality, just under different circumstances. But I thought that was kind of a beautiful moment. And I'm glad, like, it's like, right. Because Frank was wrong to kind of put Joe in that position. Like, yo, we're family, right? But it's like, no, family or not, you got to do the right thing. Because we always instilled in that to you to be a good person. Because I know you're a good person. I know you're a good cop, Joe. So you're going to do what's right. That's why you did that's what the whole Bobby thing was about in the first place, with you doing the right thing. And how can I ask you to compromise this good part of yourself, because the world could do with good cops in this world. So I thought that was just in totality, I just thought that was kind of a nice moment. And then there's the whole Mel having the baby thing. And I love that Joe's coming over and it's just kind of like, cool. It's like, oh my God, I'm going to be an uncle. This is amazing. This is awesome. So it's like, right, with the police sirens and everything, they'll be able to get her to the hospital. But the problem is, the baby starts kicking in, and it's like, no, we can't have it here. And I love that she's like, I need my John Legend. I need my John Legend, because they had it planned out what they were going to have playing. They needed the playlist. They needed this and that, but they were going to have the baby here. And she's like, Joe, you haven't even experienced it? He's like, no, but this is kind of all you got. So him and Eric are singing to her, I guess, the song that she was hoping to play. And it's a beautiful moment. Luckily, they're obviously able to get her to the hospital. And Joe gets to hold the baby. I like that. It's a beautiful moment. It's like, hey, Godfather Joe gets to, hold the baby. And you see Amy looking at him. And it's just like, wow. And she even gets to hold the baby herself. I even love Juicy. What was that line? Oh, yeah, like, I'm going to tell you all the stories about how I'm the reason why your father is the man that he is today. And just like, I love it. It's so cute. It's so amazing. But when it's all said and done, Amy has to explain to Joe, like, yeah, my parents want me to go back to Miami, like, so I can run my mom's campaign. That would mean me going home. And he's like, but what about us? It's complicated, Because Joe's just like, no. Like, all that love back in there with Mal and Eric, like, I want that. I want to have a family with you. He's like, so marry me. I'm like, kind of jumping the gun on that too. I was almost halfway expecting, because she's thinking about it, and I was wondering whether or not she'll actually say yes, because it feels like you guys haven't known each other that long, and it's a spur of the moment thing. She already made it clear too, like, she's like, I can't have a baby. Granted, like, nothing's 100% set in stone. Obviously, she's pregnant, which obviously is complications in its own right. In the musician reality, but it's like, but then it's like, right, Eric and Amy are adopting in the nursing reality, so the same thing could apply here. So, but I almost get that feeling like she wants to say no. Maybe she'll say yes because she does love Joe, but it's like, is she ready for that level of commitment? Like, do we know each other well enough for that to be okay? Like, yeah, they kind of moved in, and yeah, their relationship has kind of tested the waters, but still, like, I think it's just up to Amy to decide, like, what does she want at the end of the day. Like, she might say yes now, but will she eventually change her mind? It's interesting to see where, like, Joe and Amy's relationship is in the musician reality compared to here and everything. It's just interesting all around. And obviously, I love that line of just like, right, you can write the story, but even you can't write the ending, essentially. Like, you basically just have to wait to see what happens next. And very, very nice line to kind of end the season off on. So, at the time of me recording this, it's still up in the air whether or not Ordinary Joe is going to get season 2. Probably news on that decision by NBC is probably going to come up sooner. But I wish we had a more definitive answer. I'm hoping, obviously I have my fingers crossed, because I'd love to see where season 2 takes us. I love the concept of the show. Obviously, like, I'm a multiverse nut anyway, but obviously we're not leaning into it. It's just like, once again, just one person's life, and just how the different choices, how similar, like, those paths take you down these different choices you make. Like, just how all these millions of choices you make in your life can just affect your life. So I just love the nature of that. So just the concept I really enjoy, but I also enjoy the stories, the characters, the drama of it all. But this is a great show, and I'd love to see a season 2 to see where things would take us, because things have ended up on a pretty complicated route, and I'm curious, will we immediately pick up where season 1 is leaving us, Or will we kind of skip forward, like, yeah, it's been like a couple months, and you kind of real, because this episode was titled like the aftermath. Like, well, what about the aftermath to the aftermath? Like, will we kind of immediately pick up with a lot of these storylines, or will they be like later down the road, some stuff like we haven't figured out these paths yet, but it's like months down the road, and it's still kind of up in the air where everything landed, maybe, or maybe a week or two later type of thing. I don't know. I'd love to see where season 2 would take us. What's next for not only Joe, but everyone in his life, those around him. Because that Bobby stuff was kind of like in the forefront, and it kind of like faded in like the later parts of the season. So I'm curious, like, would that kind of rear its head? What will that bring in the police reality and the musician reality? Because the musician reality hasn't touched on that yet. I mean, he got shot for a reason, but eventually it will probably come to light. And I think I brought it up earlier in the season. Like, I think that was going to probably torpedo Regina's like situation. Finding out like, oh yeah, your husband was up to some pretty corrupt stuff, so it might taint her situation a little bit. So Amy might win in the end just because of all that. Granted, both of them have complicated husband situation. Her husband was involved with a drunk driving incident. Hers is involved with some other stuff, so stuff that was related to was it Wayne, his sister, like dying. So we'll ultimately have to wait and see. Like I said, I hope there is a season 2 for this show. So once again, fingers crossed. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.